Hello, everyone. I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of Treasury Webinars. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, Modernizing Accounts Payable, 10 Ways Automation Impacts the Bottom Line. I would like to thank our webinar partner today, Mineral Tree, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. Leading companies are leveraging automation to redefine AP best practices. Automation is allowing companies to mitigate and eliminate pain points relative to supplier relationship management, invoice processing, and payment dynamics. The strategic outcomes of AP automation include allowing discounts to be captured, improving employee productivity, removing errors caused by manual input and processes, mitigating payments fraud risk exposures, and delivering a level of transparency and visibility that facilitates a culture of continuous improvement. Today, you will discover 10 specific ways in which AP automation can impact your company's bottom line. Accounts payable can and should be a strategic function in today's world. Your company cannot afford to get left behind. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about Treasury webinars, cover a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to review our learning objectives as they offer the pillars of our value proposition to you in investing an hour of your valuable time with us today. We have recently separated what was formerly Treasury Careers into two divisions, Treasury Webinars and FP&A Webinars. We want to focus on what we do best, which is webinars, and this is our first webinar under the Treasury Webinars brand. More specifically, Treasury Webinars offers webinars designed to empower Treasury, accounts payable, and accounts receivable success at companies of all sizes across all industries. Again, we only do what we do best, webinars. Now to the exciting housekeeping items. The slides are currently available under the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. If you have any issues downloading the slides and would like a copy of the slides, please send me an email to Ernie@360thoughtleadership.com. For those of you interested in receiving CTP credit for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions and remain on for the duration of the webinars. I'd like to hear from you today so I can take your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll do my best to get to your questions at the Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. If I do not get to your question, I will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always appreciate the opportunity to increase the ROI we offer our event attendees for valuable time. Now, our learning objectives today. We'd like you to be able to identify opportunities to leverage AP automation to mitigate invoice processing costs at your company, identify opportunities to improve supplier relationships and productivity across the enterprise by leveraging AP automation at your company, identify opportunities to take more control of how and when you pay suppliers by leveraging AP automation, and discover 10 specific ways the bottom line is being impacted at companies that have invested in AP automation. Now, how am I going to accomplish my learning objectives today? Well, I'm going to walk you through our agenda. First, I'm going to talk about the evolution of accounts payable, which really is driven by why AP is getting so much attention. And we'll talk about why it's getting so much attention from finance leaders. And I'm sure we have more than a few finance leaders on our call today, CFOs, treasury leaders, controllers. So it's great to see that AP is getting the attention that it has so long deserved. We'll take a look at what AP automation done right looks like so we can really have a good perspective on how AP automation helps deliver strategic value. We'll talk about supplier relationship management, and we'll talk about the challenges and then the opportunities that we can unlock with AP automation. And then we'll pivot to invoice processing. We'll talk about challenges and opportunities in that area as well. And then we'll talk about how you can take control of payments. In taking control of payments, there's two fronts there. Really taking control of how you pay your suppliers. So whether it's a check, ACH, wire, or whether you are able to convince them to take commercial credit cards, which can include rebates. We'll talk about challenges and opportunities there. And then really from those three main areas of opportunity, we'll talk about 10 specific ways that AP automation done right impacts the bottom line. And what this really does is it gives you the basis of that business case So for companies of all sizes, what I've found is that business case for AP automation almost sells itself. So for companies of all sizes, I encourage you, if you haven't done research in this area, just take a look. There's a lot of information out there. Above and beyond the webinar, I'm going to share some additional resources with you. So hopefully, if nothing else, I will inspire you to have conversations within AP, beyond AP, with your CFO, with your treasurer, inspire you to make connections with your colleagues on LinkedIn, just to do more research. And then those of you who might already have invested in AP automation, I want to make sure that you are getting the full value out of your investment in that automation and related technology. And the other thing that we'll do, we'll offer some closing thoughts and some resources. Again, I'd like to give additional resources, because I know that I'm not going to be able to answer all of your questions today, and I'm not going to be able to tell each and every one of you how to improve AP automation at your company. Where you stand depends on where you sit. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some meaningful takeaways throughout the webinar. I also want to give you a warning. We are going to have a few more polling questions than usual, and we are going to cover quite a bit of content. So buckle your seatbelts, and I will also, throughout the webinar, I'll point out slides that I think would be valuable for you to possibly print out yourself for your information, or maybe to share with your colleagues. Again, if you're not the AP leader, it may help facilitate those conversations. And if you are the AP leader, it may help you have conversations with your CFO and your treasury leader and maybe your controller as well. But first thing I'm going to do is get started with our first polling question. So I would like to benchmark a little bit and kind of help focus my content. I'm asking you to share with us your primary challenge within accounts payable today at your company. So not enough resources to manage the volume that you have. Just your workflows might not be consistent. You have issues with reporting, and then your audit trail makes your vendor inquiries difficult. It amazes me in some of the research that I've seen how much time is spent with suppliers on the phone, hours a day, 10, 20, 30 hours a week. So that's an area where I think that AP automation could really offer some value. And of course, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. And those of you after CTP credits, you'll have to answer all of our polling questions here today. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question, take a quick look at the results, and then I'll make a little bit of color commentary, and then you'll note that I will refer back to these polling results as I address these certain areas, which are certainly common pain points across companies of all sizes. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question, go ahead and share the results, and of course, not surprisingly, we have 28% not enough to manage the volume, and that's really a lot where AP automation can really help a lot. And then what I like to say is, in terms of AP automation, it's not necessarily that you want to look to reduce headcount. It's that you want to give your staff the opportunity to focus on more strategic activities. I've seen companies that aren't even that large, just from efficiency gains, really gain an extra employee or two without gaining headcount. And then workflows are inconsistent, and I would imagine that's because of siloed processes and manual processes. So we'll talk about that. And then another key is reporting is limited. So really, visibility is really the key, and those reports are key as well to recognize areas of opportunity, manage those customer relationships. So that's obviously key as well. And then the 14% of you that don't know, I'm hoping that one action that I've inspired you to do after the webinar is to go find out. So thank you very much for your consideration. So let's just take a little look back. My career as a Treasury professional started a while ago, but when I started, we were more on this back office. That's what AP was. And then I've seen a minor transition into the point of collaboration. But then with the explosion of technology and data, especially over the last 2 years, I've seen AP really become a true intelligence hub, because we're now looking at AP as a way to really engage our suppliers, which we'll talk about, which can be valuable on many levels. And one of them is controlling how and when we pay suppliers, cash conversion optimization, strategic opportunities as well. Growth requires innovation, and I'm seeing more and more companies go into partnerships with their suppliers, and especially those of you in manufacturing. the relationships with your suppliers is absolutely critical. And so just a little evidence of this, I love to cite research. So you'll notice on several slides I have sources with hyperlinks. So I encourage you to download the slides, take a look at some of the research. And this just really shows from my mind where I came from, how far we've come. It's great for me to see 45% consider AP as very valuable, highly involved in finance operation. And this is really the cat's meow, exceptionally valuable. AP serves as a key hub. And this is where I think companies of all sizes can be. And AP automation aligned with people and process can help us get there. And then we still have 13% as a back office function, but to me, that number was better than I expected. I expect what we'll see as people like myself do a better job at educating finance leaders, AP, Treasury, and CFOs, what we'll start to see as people really invest more in AP and automation, not only that, but the processes and people as well. And we'll see this 11% grow over the next few years. And then just kind of proof of this evolution, AP leaders are now getting involved in the technology selection and management, and we'll talk about automation today, so hopefully that's very relevant. Driving financial visibility, that is really key, making those decisions, optimizing our cash deployments, and providing intelligence, right, to key stakeholders, the CFO, the CEO, and then those in procurement. So those relationships with our suppliers are critical. What we've seen prior to the last 2 years is a focus on customer relationship management, which is absolutely important. But what the new technology allows us to do is to focus on supplier relationship management. So I call that SRM, and hopefully we'll see more of that. Influencing enterprise cash and corporate liquidity as we get that visibility right into accounts payable. That allows us to help our treasury professionals with their cash forecasting, which allows us to avoid transactions that we don't need, such as borrowing and entering into FX transactions. And then this is what we'll talk about. The bottom 2 points is what we'll talk about, which you'll be seeing more if you listen to webinars on AP automation. And the value, what you'll start to see, what you should see, is more of a focus on the value in terms of supplier relationship management, and then that supply chain management in terms of discounts that we can now see and take, and opportunities to create discounts, dynamic discounting. So obviously reducing the processing costs is key, but excuse me, the supplier relationship management and the supply chain finance are just as important, and sometimes offer even more value. So why accounts payable? Why now? This may be a good way just for you to, if you're not the CFO, to engage that CFO. Obviously, better cash management is a top priority for CFOs, especially if you're in a public company. Cash deployment, cash flows, efficiency is key. Companies are realizing the value of mitigating AP processing costs, a key component. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how a lot of the challenges that companies face is they have never tried to estimate the value to process an invoice, and that's something that I encourage everyone to do. So that can be a key piece of your value proposition, is mitigating those invoice processing costs twofold. One, it can show you that where your company is benchmarked relative to a lot of research out there. And then as you put these costs together, what you're going to see is opportunities to mitigate those costs. So it's kind of like you start peeling back the onion. And those of you who may be CFOs and haven't really gotten to the weeds of accounts payable, I think it's a very worthwhile process. And to me, I always found it fascinating. I really enjoyed working with my accounts payable colleagues. And so you'll really see how many people, processes, and systems are involved. And then companies are realizing the value of improving supplier relationships. And those of us who have that finance background, we need to transition a little bit, because when I was in finance, the only time we ever talked to our suppliers was if there was an issue. So we were playing referee, or we were playing Mr. No, and we really have to engage with our customers on a more professional level. Maybe we engage with the finance professionals at our suppliers, and what we can actually do is, as we improve the way our accounts payable process, in the process, we can also improve the AR process of our suppliers as well. So we can really build those valuable relationships. What do those valuable relationships do? They help us educate our suppliers in terms of how we pay them so they're more receptive to how we pay them. Maybe they're not stuck on checks, and also gives us opportunities to negotiate discounts as that makes sense as well. And those two pieces can be extremely valuable. And then related, like I said, to the better relationships, the value of controlling how you pay suppliers. So you should really be looking at your AP and in a partnership with your Treasury. What is your payment portfolio? How are you paying suppliers and why? And then when are you paying suppliers, right? Do you have flexibility there? You may want to engage procurement in here as well. And then another important thing is that payments fraud is rampant. And we'll throw a couple results out. The AFP just released their 2018 Fraud and Control Survey. I recommend that you take a look at that. Always fascinating. And then I believe Strategic Treasurer is also about to release their Payments, Frauds, and Control Survey. So those are two excellent sources of that payments fraud. And payments fraud is absolutely dependent on how the type of payment, but also in terms of the processes that you have in terms of manual versus automated process. And then finally, and I think this is a very important message that I try and get out, is the right technology is affordable to any business, any size business, and it's cost effective. So that just really gets us the inspiration. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit you with your next polling question, and just trying to level set to the audience, asking you to share with us where your company is currently at in terms of the process of automating accounts payable, so I can really tailor my comments. Usually the attendees fall into one of three categories. One is that they really haven't thought about it too much. They're just in Excel, they're new to their jobs. Two is they're really just doing some discovery information. Maybe they're looking at an AP automation suppliers. And then there's the third level, which folks are already invested in AP automation. They have a lot of experience, and they're just level setting to see if they are realizing all the benefits or just trying to stay on top of their game. So again, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions. Again, those of you interested in CTP credit, I'll need to ask you to answer all of our polling questions and stay on for the duration of the webinar. So let me go ahead and close the polling question here, and let's take a quick peek at the results. And what we see is about half of you, 48%, are just starting or currently evaluating providers. So that's good. Hopefully this information will be tremendously valuable. I just want to note to everyone on the webinar, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about any of the content on the webinar after the webinar, so feel free to reach out. So again, 48% of you, and then we've got 38% of you the implementation and already have it in place. So hopefully those of you in that area, we will help you on the implementation phase to make that most effective and to really optimize that ROI. And then those of you who have invested in AP automation, maybe you're the CFO, maybe you want to go back and ask your project leader, what's the ROI that we've realized for our AP automation project? And then a few of the slides here, you'll be able to look at some of the components, and maybe you'll be able to extract even more value out of that AP automation investment. So thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to answer the polling question. So I'm going to go a little basic on you guys for just a few minutes. So please bear with me, those of you who are accounts payable experts. But part of the beauty of this is we're getting executives to really pay attention to accounts payable. So one of the things that we need to communicate to them is how complicated the entire process is in terms of people, process, and technology, and then look at automation at the key points that we have and what that looks like. So we have, again, this might be a good slide to print out. So we still have our suppliers down here. We have to onboard our suppliers, which can be an issue. And it's important to note here is that is the start of your relationship. So you really want to manage every interaction you have with your suppliers. It all starts with your onboarding your suppliers, how you communicate, issue resolution. So that's very important. So again, getting them on board, and then they verify them. They have to be approved. We want to get everything over to our folks, get it approved, the process for payment, so we can have errors in the payments regarding how they were set up, maybe in your ERP system. We have to have the approvals. We have to get our bank involved. And then how effective is our bank at affecting our payments? Can we communicate the status of a payment, what we're paying for, what's the remittance information on either side, how much is it costing us, and then this is a round process. So people, process, technology. So there's a lot of steps, a lot of key bottlenecks in a lot of areas of opportunities. And the first area that we'll focus on really is that supplier relationship management, which I said begins right there when we onboard our suppliers. So let's take a look at AP automation looks like done right. I love these. It's kind of 4 steps from my webinar partner. I think this to me really makes it clear. And so what does it look like? So those of you who are looking or you're looking or you're reviewing what you have now, this is a great thing to see. So the automation captures the invoice capture. You can scan invoices in bulk, convert them to invoices, searchable PDF documents. There's usually some OCR technology involved. Originate invoice in your accounting application or your invoice to pay automation solution. You can upload or email documents or allow your vendors to email invoice documents. Part of this process is going to be if your suppliers aren't familiar with electronic exchange of information, that's somewhere where having that good relationship can help, because that's really can impact the cost of processing an invoice and also the opportunity to take those to negotiate and take those discounts, because that really impacts how long it can take you to pay. And then you want to this is extraction. You want to be able to extract the header and GL coded line item. You want to avoid manual invoice entry, and then you want to link invoice documents with invoice data, create that audit trail. So step 1 is capture, and then we have approve. You want to route the invoice for approval, route it to specific. You can base it on the name or other invoice data. You can customize your workflows. You can require invoice approval. There's rules for payment or not. And then it really gives you rigorous controls and tracking. What can hold us up here? Manual processes, manual approvals, not being able to approve on the road. And then sometimes I see companies, they really look at, at their workflow, and then I'm going to optimize my workflow, no touch workflow, but there's always going to be a case where you're going to have that exception processing. So you always have to look at that other branch that goes out to that exception processing, and how do I automate that exception processing as well. And that effectiveness of that exception processing is absolutely critical to my supplier relationship management. And then authorize, everything set up. How do we get that payment out the door in a timely manner? Scan, support, secure. We want to segregate duties. And then 2-factor payment verification. Again, sometimes people have concerns with automation with controls, but you can absolutely work with your providers and your internal IT team to set those controls in place so it's more secure and you're mitigating those risks. And then pay, send payments directly and securely. So there's some fraud. Those of you who do checks, this can facilitate positive pay. Some of the providers have online account fraud protection. And then this helps us with our efficiency of payments. A lot of times you can send one payments file for different payments instead of sending multiple payments, and you can control when that payment goes out the door. Helps your folks in Treasury. So those 4 steps are really key. So you want to look at those for the features of that AP automation, and then the functionality of that AP automation is really what unlocks some of the value, the savings, and productivity improvements that we're going to see. So now we're going to go ahead and ask our next polling question. Before we start to talk about supplier relationships, would like to ask you to share with me how you would characterize the overall state of your company's relationships with suppliers. Be honest, not good. You have poor communications, constant issues. Not good, but getting better. Maybe you'd say they're acceptable. And then good, you communicate and collaborate effectively, or you're not really sure at this time. I just want to remind everyone that I can take your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. I appreciate your questions, and of course I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. So I'm going to go ahead and close the polling questions here in a few seconds. Then we'll take a look at some supplier relationship pain points and how automation can help us alleviate those pain points and then dig deeper into the value of improving those supplier relationships, so it can help you quantify the business case of investing in AP automation. I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the results. So we see that 75% of us still have some work. I'm glad to see 26% of you communicate and collaborate effectively, and 9 of you don't know. So again, those of you that's your takeaway. Let's find out, right? But to me, it seems like acceptable. Well, acceptable. I think we can always do better, and hopefully, after the webinar, I will identify opportunities to improve your relationships with suppliers. So those of you in finance, again, I encourage you to have more direct interaction with your suppliers. And if you want to follow up with me offline, I have specific tactics to do so. And then those of you who are dealing with your suppliers, hopefully being able to leverage technology, maybe to just remove any asymmetries in the information that you have will be extremely helpful, and getting visibility into all communication with your suppliers. So sometimes people inadvertently get blindsided because they don't know the conversations that have been going on. And then the other thing on the reporting side is it's good because you'll start to see trends if you have issues with suppliers, disputes, how long they take, and then you can absolutely be proactive in your relationships with your suppliers. So I'm going to go ahead and get back to my content on supplier relationships. And so let's take a quick look at the supplier onboarding pain points. So these are things that can be costly if you don't do them right. Some of you are cringing. Believe me, I cringe with you because I've been there, done that. One thing which people might not think about is, especially in today's world, you can add illegal suppliers. So you have to be sure that your system and your folks are aware of restrictions in certain companies. If you don't do it right, you can have delays in receiving tax forms onboarding your suppliers. You can have issues in supplier data quality. So some of the AP automation providers have supplier portals. So with the right controls, giving your suppliers control of their information absolutely helps. Related to data quality, we've seen duplicate supplier records. Another thing that gets really dicey sometimes is the parent-child relationship. So that's something that we want to collaborate with our colleagues on the other side. And so that's something that can be tremendously time-consuming. And then, of course, the last thing we want is incorrect payment instructions. We are sending money where it's not going or supposed to go, and there's an issue there. I haven't received my money. So those are just areas to look at in terms of your onboarding. Take a look at that, dig down that deep, look at your process. Is it automated, not automated? How much time is being spent on adding a supplier? So that really sets the foundation of a good relationship. I think that's important to point out. Supplier management pain points in general. I mentioned lack of visibility. I'll call that asymmetry of information. So I've witnessed calls, been on calls where there's just a basic disagreement on what is owed, when it's owed, discounts taken, not taken. So that can oftentimes be eliminated when you're looking at the same information. Sometimes the lack of technology can cause untimely communication, just technology in general, and really the type of relationship that you have in general, or your company has, and maybe you don't value suppliers as much as you should. There's collaboration barriers, and what a lot of the pain points together mean is that you are being reactive instead of proactive, which obviously is something that we would like to flip. We want to be proactive, and then this is something that a lot of companies face. And again, this is sometimes based on asymmetry of information. There's just inefficient, I'll call it dispute resolution. So a lot of times there really isn't a dispute. There's a miscommunication. We know what that causes, bad feelings. Again, I've seen this before. If you don't know this, if you're not the AP leader, I would go to your AP team and ask them, how many hours does your department or do you spend on the phone with our suppliers going through disputes? And so that's a key area where if we can get more efficient communication, we can save time. And also, isn't it nice to have happy suppliers? Again, especially those of us in manufacturing. What if there's weather coming? What if we need something? What if there's a strategic opportunity? Again, that relationship, every every interaction from our company with the supplier matters, and that's what needs to be stressed with everyone on your side in the AP process. And then just some more information. Another good report, PayStream Advisor Supplier Management Report. So just some of the things that you might want to touch base with your team, things that can impact your supplier relationship and can impact your ability to control how and when you pay. Data management, might take a look at that, look in the mirror, how's that done? Can we do it better? Again, I mentioned supplier dispute query response times. With that reporting, we can start to identify trends and cut things off at the pass. We notice certain suppliers, maybe it's certain industries, and maybe it's just that one of our AP people is just having a little bit, a hard time, and they're not being as friendly as they should be, and that might show up in their dispute resolution times. And then, of course, we want to have contract compliance, and of course, we don't want late payments. But there's a lot of things that can contribute to us making those late payments, which can lead to penalties. So sometimes, when we look at efficiency, sometimes it takes companies so long to process invoices, they're not even able to take discounts, and sometimes they're not even able to pay within the terms that are negotiated by their procurement teams. So let's take a look at this value proposition I talk about. So AP automation, what can we do in terms of better supplier relationships? What is the value on that front? So that's front number one. It can facilitate accurate supplier master records and all related banking information. That's fraud mitigation, time saving. And I'll say this over and over again, you want to maximize the time, minimize the time your team is spending on non-value add activities, looking at supplier master records, tying parent-child relationships, looking at banking information is all non-value add at the end of the day. It facilitates opportunities to capture existing discounts. AP automation often gives us visibility into those discounts. Companies should be making educated decisions on whether or not you're capturing existing discounts. And then it also facilitates opportunities to negotiate discounts, i.e. dynamic discount. Maybe you're going to go into supply chain financing, but that better relationship gives you the ability to breach these topics with your suppliers. Related to that is we have to be able to process our invoices efficiently. The faster we can get those turned, the more opportunities we might have. And then again, said this a lot, mitigates time spent on phone with suppliers resolving real or perceived issues. So that's going to be Pier 1 of AP automation and that value proposition. All these subpoints can absolutely impact the bottom line. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit to processing cost mitigation. So I'll spend some time here. I've done many webinars, and I have many other webinars that are really almost majority focused on mitigating process costs. So we'll go into processing costs here. But if you want to really dive deep on the processing costs, I'm happy to give you links and information to other webinars. So there's a lot that goes into that. But you absolutely should invest in coming up with a cost to process that single invoice. So information from a study, Ardent Partners, a State of Payable, ePayables 2017, just to show you what those benefits can look like. Ardent Partners is similar to the Gartner concept of best in class versus all others. So you look at that all-inclusive cost to process an invoice, $2.74. To me, that seems a little low. And then all others is 15. So what you really want to look at from your side is, okay, where are you at and where can you go? So just for example, just look at that difference. Let's say that difference is $10, $13, just moving to a place where you have invested in automation. And in some industries, I know you're out there saying, man, my number's like $100 an invoice. Maybe it's airline, and that could be the case. What you want to look at is what is that difference, right? What is that difference? And then for the more volume, obviously that number goes up. But this in and of itself can make the business case. And then time to process a single invoice. So this is good. I think this is a little low, but then 3.5 days. I've seen statistics that say that time is as much as 30 days or more than 30 days. So maybe we're getting better. Maybe it's different industries, but we want to definitely mitigate that. So, so 210 net 30. So we got to get this boy under here under 12 to 10 so we can take those discounts, and then we can start to negotiate right? That discount for how about if we pay, XYZ. Obviously, that depends on your company's cost of capital. Sometimes, believe it or not, it even makes sense for companies to borrow money to take those discounts. And then, obviously, in terms of mitigating the time our staff spends and their productivity, we want to lower that invoice exception rate. We want to get that straight through processing. Anytime someone touches something, it's going to cost us time and efficiency. Again, we would do well to get our suppliers to submit invoices electronically. And then this is something which was eye-opening to me, even though I'm in the weeds quite a bit, is percentage of invoices linked to PO. In an automation solution, this is somewhere what I would look, that automated PO matching is something that can really impact those days. So in terms of those processing mitigation costs, that can be a big number as well. So when you look at those all-inclusive costs, you take a look at that diagram and look at every place, every person internally that's touching that document, how much time do they spend reviewing it. On the, you got to consider the accounting side as well. Maybe it's a treasury side, so everyone that's involved in that process. So now I'm going to go ahead and launch our next polling question to pivot to our next topic on the payments front. So I would like you to share with me how much control you believe you have regarding how you pay suppliers. Can you dictate to your suppliers how you pay? Do you just pay by check and not think about it? Is that something that's a strategic focus or not? So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds or so. Again, those of you who might be after CTP credits for today's webinar, I need you to answer all the polling questions. Of course, I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions. And of course, I would love your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for just a few more seconds. Then I'm going to go ahead and close the polling question, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the results, and then we'll start to look at the payments, the pain points, and then the value that we can realize if we're able to have those good relationships with our suppliers and also our AP automations providers to take control of how and when we pay. So I'm going to go ahead and close, and I'm going to go ahead and share the result. So I am pleasantly surprised to see this result. In the past few webinars I've done, I've seen more folks in the not much category. So I'm glad to see that we've got 39% of you, which is quite a bit, this is a strategic focus. So that really blows me away a little bit. As a Treasury person, I'm absolutely thrilled to see that, because I think we really need to look at optimizing how payments are being made. And so I'm very glad to see that. And then those of you in the 43%, hopefully will give you some ideas to work with your suppliers to gain more control, or maybe you work more collaboratively with your AP automation suppliers. A lot of the partners out there actually work with you to help you convert your suppliers to your optimal payment type, to lower that payment type, and they have really time-trusted strategies on how to do that. But it all starts with that good relationship. If you don't have a good relationship, no one's going to be able to help convert your suppliers. So thank you very much, everyone, for your consideration in answering that polling question for me, and your patience with all of my polling question, but I think it really helps me guide my content. So our payments pain points, we talked about these earlier, just to put a fine point on them, and because I like to put cute pictures on there on my slides. So you can have discounts lost. You just don't have that visibility there. So you don't know what you don't know, but you're also you're not taking advantage of potential opportunities. We have ineffective working capital management. If we're not giving our Treasury folks a good forecast, it makes our Treasury folks pay when they don't need to pay, maybe enter into foreign exchange transaction they don't need to. If we're a net borrower, it may cause us to borrow money when we don't need to, or force us to borrow money in a panic, which will cost us borrowing costs. And then costly payment methods. It's great to see that 39% of you are really looking to optimize that payment type portfolio. So those are common pain points. And then if we're not using automation, we have to have controls, but there are such things as cumbersome controls. They're manual. You can't do it on the road. there's too many parties involved in the process, not enough streamlining, and too much of an opportunity for that bottleneck. So those are just some of the common pain points that I see. And just given that 39% of you are already doing this, I'll go through this a little more swiftly than normal, but just for you, good review. For those of you who aren't in the weeds in payments and AP, just quickly through the payment types and some of the costs, just the motivation to optimize that portfolio. Obviously, checks, AFP surveys still show that the majority of folks are still writing checks. Checks are still the highest target of payments fraud. ACH, and then Fed wires, and then we have commercial cards, which come in more flavors than I could have ever imagined when I was in a Treasury professional. So just this slide is for your reference, and so I'm not going to read through this slide, but just something to note that these can all be certain types of cards that you might want to take a look at. What I'm starting to see more is these AP automation suppliers. As you get on these supplier portals, we're looking for single-use cards and really these virtual card programs, and some of those will get you some rebates that can be meaningful in terms of helping mitigate those payments costs. So that's just the type there. And just an overview, just kind of interesting from PayStream Advisors. The good news is we've got checks below 50%, which is cool. And then we've got, ACH, and I think what we'll start to see the commercial cards section go up quite a bit. If we were to look at this in Europe, we would see that this would be totally probably flipped, but just interesting to benchmark. I like that share benchmarking, and I like to share those reports. So just interesting. So now I'm going to go ahead and ask our next polling question, just to get a sense of the payments mix of your portfolios out there, asking you to share with me how you would characterize the current mix of your supplier payment types. Answers: majority by checks, majority by electronic payments. Maybe you're about equal, or maybe you don't know. So just interesting to see how many of you out there are able to really start to get away from checks. I was in manufacturing, and sometimes it's a little bit more difficult on that side to get away from those checks at some point. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the polling question up for another few seconds or so. Then I'm going to go ahead and share the results, and then we're going to go ahead and take a quick peek at those, and then we're going to take a quick peek at just some of the payment costs by payment type, so it will kind of resonate to those of you that really haven't started to focus on optimizing your payment mix portfolio. So let me go ahead and close the polling question. Thank you everyone for answering, and then we'll see that at 45% of you are 45% of you, or I'll say over 50%, because those of you that don't know, it's probably maybe checks. So quite a few are majority by checks, or equal amount between checks and electronic payments. So in today's world, I think you always want to look to mitigate the amount of checks that you write. So I would go back as a takeaway and see who those checks are going to. Why are we writing those checks? If it's a matter of the remittance information, that's something that we can absolutely take care of. And so another webinar that we've done is on the myths, or how to engage your suppliers. So again, contact me after the webinar, give you some more information on that front. So glad to see that we've got 48% majority by electronic payments, but to all of you out there, I would say that would be a KPI of mine in AP, is to look at the amount, optimizing that payments portfolio, so have targets for each type, and then identify the best candidates to convert with suppliers. So, and you can do that type of things and have your folks do that type of analysis if they are not busy doing manual tasks. So thank you very much. So let's look at payment costs. This is from 2015, but I think it's still, the point is how much the cost difference is. Sending a paper check is 10 times more expensive than an internal check. Receiving a paper check is 5 times as expensive. So on their side, you can say, when I send you a check, it's 5 times more expensive for you to process it. So again, this is a huge strategic opportunity here, right? Let's help our suppliers lower their AR processing costs. So for wire payment, unless there's a reason to do wire payment, you want to really follow the wire payment. It's probably it's not the best practice, but again, if you want to track it. So if I was funding an acquisition, I always did a wire payment. Median cost for outgoing P card, TE virtual card, again, look at that, $1 and $1.99, and then the median range of rebate rewarded on annual card spend. Those P cards can be 2650 basis points. I've seen that higher as well. So just some interesting piece if you're looking to make that case to optimize that. So just some background for your information. Payment method portfolio, your portfolio, you want to look at that. You want to look at changes in percentage by payment types. You want to look at that as a KPI. Set some goals, and then you might want to make changes in types of payments offered, but you have to be ready. You have to be ready for that. So you have to make sure that your team is ready for that. And then you should have, I believe you should have programs in place to convert suppliers to target payment types. Again, I think once you do that, even that back of the envelope ROI calculation, I think you'll see that that's absolutely can be a game changer as well. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys with another polling question, asking you to share with you your biggest obstacle in being able to optimize the mix of payments. So 39% of you said it's a strategic focus of yours. So interesting to see from everyone, but especially from those as well who are in that 39%. What is it that's kind of keeping you from reaching your targets and your goals there? So, of course, we appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling questions here today. And I would like to once again remind everyone that we can take your questions in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. I've had more than a few questions for this, so I'm going to go ahead and share this before I close the polling question. My email address is ERNIE at 360.leadership.com. Would love to connect with everyone after the webinar and continue these conversations. So let me go ahead and close that polling question to be mindful of our time. Let's go ahead and take a look. And so 21% don't believe they have the leverage. They don't have the leverage. So that's something you might want to take a look at and review with your team. Maybe it's in your contracts, your procurement, a takeaway there. 43% we don't have the right systems and processes in place to support the processing of electronic payments. So hopefully this webinar will inspire you to take a look at the AP automation solutions, and also related to that, if you're going to look at that AP automation solution investment, you might also walk over, if you're not the treasurer, look at your treasury department. Do you have a TMS that you're looking at? So if you want to look at that investment in technology, a lot of times when you're looking at that ROI with AP, you're going to have some benefits to Treasury as well. So you would, if you're not in Treasury, you'd want to go collaborate with your Treasury professionals, your Treasury folks. You want to go and collaborate with your AP leaders. And so this is a tremendous opportunity to really collaborate and deliver value across the whole cash conversion cycle, like I said. And also, I would even bring my AR department over as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And then let's just talk a little bit about conversion. I know it's a topic of webinars. I've done them before, a whole topic on how to conversion that works. I call it dancing with your suppliers. So here's some of the realities. The risk of payments fraud is less with the electronic payments. More and more companies prefer electronic payments, so some folks don't even ask to get off checks because they think that their suppliers don't want them. That's not necessarily true. Again, this dating myself, technology can now automate the collection and capture of remittance information, which wasn't the case. In my day, we had to use the old lockbox because we needed that remittance information. And then technology can automate the linking of remittance and payments data, which sometimes is an obstacle. And then if you have a solution partner and it's a SaaS-based solution, you can minimize the overhead, and the involvement of the IT department. So again, just something to keep in mind on the conversion side. And then here's a slide that I would print out, overcoming e-payment adoption obstacles. So on your side, you need to have effective and efficient processes in place to support where we want to push our suppliers a little bit. You want to be a good customer, have that supplier relationships. You need to communicate the benefits to your suppliers: faster payment times, more secure and accurate payments, remittance information, reduce their AR processing costs. Sometimes it makes sense to work with that e-payable solution provider because, again, some of them are working with you to help you get those optimal payment types. Some companies have success in a multi-stage phase-out program, so focus in one area on get that low-hanging fruit out of the way, identify those, and make that progress, and then move from there. And then sometimes work with procurement. You can actually, in some cases, with a good relationship, specify an electronic payment method within those supplier contracts. So those are all ways to help yourself gain more control over those payments. So in terms of payment types, what is the value there? What's our value proposition there? You can help us mitigate fraud, payment fraud exposures, one, by payment type, and two, by eliminating manual processes. If you're eliminating a system out of the process, you're eliminating a person out of the process, that's mitigating some exposures. You can mitigate the cost of making payments as we take control and optimize how we pay. Commercial payment types can offer rebates, so if you can convert some of your suppliers to accept certain card payments, that can mitigate payment costs. It improves working capital management as we collaborate with our Treasury professionals, and if done right, it can improve compliance and control. So you see this business case before you got on here. You're probably like, AP is boring, and now you're really excited about accounts payable. I get pretty excited about it because there's so much opportunity there. And then just to give you some hard information behind what I'm saying, again, a PayStream Advisors report, but just some of the benefits of moving to e-payments if you have any issues internally, convenience, but then lower processing costs, those P cards. So it's just going to lay out the business case for investing in optimizing that payments portfolio for you to realize one of those dimensions of value that can impact the bottom line. And then just to show you some actual trends in payments fraud, again, AFP just released their payments fraud and control survey. Always interesting in there, especially if you're really involved in payments and AP. Payment methods were the target. We still see that checks, I think 74% is an all-time high, or it's the incidence across, no, the incidence across everyone is an all-time high, 78%. Of course, some of that's being driven by the BEC scams, but you'll see fraud's not going away. And then to make my point, checks are still the highest target. And then going from checks to commercial cards, we're going from 74% to 30%. Now, you also have to look at what is the potential size of that exposure as well. But this just kind of shows that, makes my point of why we really need to focus on payments. In addition to the cost side, we need to look at that risk management as well. And AP automation can improve our management of payments risk as well. So some closing thoughts in key areas: supplier relationships, how you can make those better. And I talked about the value of doing that. The onboarding process, make it easier. Want to educate your suppliers the benefits of electronic document exchange, electronic payments, accepting those, and the payments timing, maybe discounts. You want to look at the supplier contracts, work with your procurement team. You want to maintain open lines of communication. You want to minimize the asymmetry of information. Make sure your communication is proactive and consistent and supportive. And then you want that visibility into those communication with your suppliers. So this is a slide I would print out. And this is my little fun part. You have to be ready to dance with your suppliers. We talked about this before. You want efficient exchange of invoices. You want an environment of proactive supplier relationship. And then you want to understand your supplier's cost of accepting different payment types, so you can show that you've done your homework if you're going to be the one on the phone to having these conversations about how you are paying. And then if you don't know how to dance with your suppliers, you can, you need to know how to dance with suppliers. More dancing steps for me. communicate an understanding of their costs, identify the conversion type that makes most sense to them, communicate the benefits, and then, like I said, you could partner with the Payable solution to improve your dance moves, or people can actually dance in your place when it makes sense to you. So here it is, everyone. The cat's meow. You've been waiting an hour for my 10 ways AP automation impacts the bottom line. So here they are. This is your business case to look at. And those of you who are invested, you should be realizing all these benefits. One, you can mitigate invoice processing costs, mitigate the payment of duplicate invoices, which the number is going up and down in research. It's as high as 0.5%, 1%, mitigates the time resolving supplier issues, disputes, allows discount opportunities to be captured, facilitates early payment program opportunities, impacts the productivity of employees processing invoices, mitigates payment processing costs, you can realize rebates from commercial card payments, improves working capital management, and impacts the productivity of employees approving and effecting payments. So 5 years ago, if you'd have told me to go in the office of my CFO and tell me that I'm going to go in and tell him I want him to invest in AP automation, I would have probably looked at you funny. And when I would have walked into my CFO's office, he would have given me a strange look, or he might have shown me the door. If I go in there with just this slide, I think his eyes are going to light up. So the business case is tremendously compelling. And so again, from what we saw from the webinar, a lot of you are there or looking. Those of you that don't know, I encourage you to look, do your homework. Besides the webinar, look at some of the resources that I've shared with you. One of them, which is pretty interesting to me, is you can do these back of the envelope calculations, your AP automation ROI calculator, strategic advantages of AP automation. There's LinkedIn groups, there's your colleagues. So there's so much information out there for you to really bring your accounts payable function to best in class at your organization. So I encourage you to take a look at those resources. So I'm going to go ahead. We have time for just a few questions in our Q&A. And then those of you who I don't get a chance to respond to your questions, I will go ahead and follow up with you afterwards. So we'll see. So I'm getting some questions about effective collab. Let's talk about winning the business case. So I'm taking about 3 or 4 questions here, and I'll answer them all at once. So making the effective business case. So I've given you a lot of components there. In order to make that effective business case, you have to understand your constituency. So your constituency is not only who has the purse strings, it's also who's going to be involved in the execution of your project, whatever the scope of your AP automation process might be. So you want to engage Mr. or Mrs. No, and you do that. People are different. Someone who's a little bit easier to kind of crack, I would say, you can go over there and have a direct conversation, take them out to lunch. Lunch always works. You might have to try the indirect approach. You might take a friend of that person out to lunch, but I can't tell you how valuable it is to have the person who's going to have the biggest objection to your project on board. I've seen it happen in a meeting. I've seen a project meeting start where they're trying to discuss whether or not it's valid for investment. The first thing the CEO does, he looks at the person who's going to have the most objections and say, what do you think about that? Well, you know what? If you haven't talked to that person, you're about to get torpedoed. So you want to have that person, that conversation. I've seen it. I've done it. I've had that person on my side. And so when when they ask that question, she goes, "Oh yeah, we've been talking about this. We've been involved. I think it's a good project." So you want to engage people, get them that accountability. So you want to establish that accountability, and you want to get that buy-in across the enterprise. Again, not only from the purse string holders, but also from those who are going to be affected. And then you have to present in a concise fashion with passion. So there's an art form to that. So that's a topic that I have some other questions on too. Happy to have those conversations as well. In order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to have to go ahead and close our Q&A session for today. As I make my final comments, I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question. I like to ask folks if they had a certain amount of money that they could spend. Just came out, not in the budget. The CEO just came and said, you have $250,000
to improve the value delivered by AP? How are you going to spend that money? Is it going to be focused on technology, talent, or overhauling process, or kind of it's an even game for you, or is it some other area that really needs your attention? I would like to once again thank our webinar partner, Mineral Tree. We appreciate their commitment to thought leadership, which is also evident in the great content and resources they offer, which you can review by visiting the Mineral Tree website. So I'm going to go ahead and close our final polling question. And finally, to you, our audience, thank you so much for your valuable time today. Please let us know what we can do better. Make the rest of your day great, everyone.